Alright, let's talk Isaiah 42. This chapter is one of the most hotly debated passages in the entire Bible, and for good reason. It's often at the center of discussions between Christians, Jews, and even Muslims, each group bringing their own perspective and interpretations to the table. This chapter is big in religious debates, especially when people say it's all about Jesus. For centuries, many have claimed that Isaiah 42 is a clear prophecy about Jesus Christ, pointing to his life and mission. But is it really that straightforward? But if that's true, some verses just don't add up. When you actually read the chapter closely, you'll notice some details that seem to clash with the story of Jesus as told in the Gospels. Let's break down 5 questions that get straight to the heart of it. These aren't just minor details, they are big questions that challenge the traditional view. First up, verse 19. It calls the servant blind and deaf. That's a pretty strong statement, and it's not something you can just gloss over. Now, if this servant is Jesus, how does that fit? Jesus, according to the Gospels, was anything but blind or deaf to God's will. He's portrayed as having a deep spiritual awareness and a direct connection to the divine. Jesus is described in the Gospels as spiritually insightful, not blind or deaf to God's message. He's the one opening the eyes of the blind, both literally and metaphorically. So, could this really be about him? Or is it pointing to someone else? Maybe a nation or a prophet who the world dismissed until their message was made clear. Some scholars suggest the servant could represent Israel itself, or perhaps another figure entirely. Second, verse 24 says, the servant was disobedient. Hold up, that's a major red flag if you're trying to link this directly to Jesus. In Christianity, Jesus is seen as perfectly obedient to God. He's the model of faithfulness, never straying from his mission or God's commands. There's no record of him turning away from God's commands. In fact, the Gospels emphasize his unwavering commitment, even in the face of suffering and death. If Isaiah's servant slipped up or strayed, it doesn't match Jesus' story at all. This is a serious contradiction that can't be ignored if you're trying to make a direct connection. Third, check out verse 11. It mentions Kedar and Arabia. Why is that? These aren't just random places. They're specific regions with their own histories and significance. Jesus' mission was mostly in Judea and Galilee. He rarely, if ever, traveled to Arabia, and his teachings were centered in the land of Israel. But Kedar, that's in Arabia. The mention of these places suggests the servant's impact would reach far beyond Israel's borders into lands that Jesus never visited. Now think about who actually came from that region and brought a global message. I'll let you do the math. It's a clue that points us in a different direction, towards someone whose influence began in Arabia and spread worldwide. Fourth, verse 4 says, the servant brings a new law. Did Jesus bring a new law, or did he say he came to fulfill the law of Moses? This is a crucial distinction. If you read the Gospels, Jesus sticks to Moses' teachings. He often quotes the Torah and emphasizes its importance, saying he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. He doesn't introduce a brand new legal code. Instead, he reinterprets and deepens the existing law, but never claims to replace it with something entirely new. So if Isaiah's servant brings something entirely new, maybe we're looking for someone else, someone who actually delivered a new set of laws. Think about figures in history who have done just that. And finally, verse 1 says the servant brings justice to the nations, not just Israel. Did Jesus do that in his lifetime? His teachings were revolutionary, but their global impact came much later. His message spread worldwide, sure, but during his life it was mostly focused on Israel. The Gospels show him ministering almost exclusively to his own people. Someone else, though, came later and changed the justice system across nations, far beyond his homeland. The servant in Isaiah seems to be a figure whose influence is immediate and international. So, if you really look at these verses, every point fits someone else more than Jesus. The details just don't line up with what we know about his life and mission. Isaiah 42 paints a picture that doesn't quite match the Jesus of the Gospels. The more you dig, the more you see the differences. It's worth asking, who fits the bill better? Is there another historical figure, or perhaps a nation, that matches these descriptions more closely? Maybe it's time to rethink what you've always been told. Sometimes the answers are more surprising and more interesting than we first imagined.